Well, good morning and welcome to the Mars Lab and to another fantastic video conference coming to you live from the Mars Lab studios in the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney. My name's Craig.
And I'm Isabel.
And we have a terrific show for you today. Waiting online, tucked away there, waiting for you guys, is Dr Abigail Allwood. She's an Australian, a NASA scientist with a special interest in Mars, which of course we love.
Yeah.
Yes. But first of all, before we get to Abby, let's meet some of our young minds, young inquiring minds who are all logged in to witness this today. So, first of all, let me see, what schools have we got? How about Francis Xavier? Where are you guys?
St. Francis Xavier. You can turn up your microphone and say big hello.
That's a fairly quiet hello.
Yeah.
Yes?
That was a silent one. That's all right.
Yeah, we have the Armidale School. Where are you guys?
Yay, good morning.
Welcome. Up in Armidale, yes. And who else we got? MLC? Wow. Well, that is the kind of enthusiasm we need for science and engineering. Yes. And one more.
Aria Park.
There we go. All right.
Good
Terrific.
morning.
Everybody, welcome. All right, so I'll just get you to switch off your mics just for the moment and get you to turn them on and off as you need when you need to ask Abby some questions. So over to you, Isabel.
Yes, well, I know that we're all very much looking forward to meeting our special guest today, Dr. Abigail Allwood. Now, Abby is an astrobiologist working at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. And she's been in the media quite a bit recently since they made the announcement that Abby will be the principal investigator for the Pixel instrument in the upcoming mission on Mars in 2020. So that's very exciting news. So good morning, Abigail. How are you this morning? Actually, this afternoon for you.
Good morning, Isabel and Craig. Yeah, good afternoon. I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Excellent. We are very excited to have a chance to speak with you this morning.
A big wave to her.
Yes,
everybody,
everyone
hello.
have a big wave to Abigail.
Can we call you Abby?
Sure.
All right, so everybody, hello Abby, come on.
There,
all the microphones are on. There we go. There we go. Excellent.
Now, Abby, what have you been doing this week? What have you been up to?
Been very busy ever since we had the instrument selected. At the moment, we're meetings. And actually, we've made some good progress this week in the development of one of the key parts of our instrument. We took one of the central parts yesterday, and we shook it and shocked it, banged it against things in a special lab for flight qualifying components to replicate the Mars environment that it would be going through, and it passed with flying colours. So that's a nice little thing that we've got tucked away this week.
Wow, excellent. So can you give us a bit of an overview of the Mars 2020 mission and what's going to be going on there?
Sure. If I can bring up the slide. Can you see that slide?
We definitely
yes, we
can.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a picture of the 2020 rover with the payload, the science payload set of instruments shown around the various parts of the rover. The idea of this mission is to use a rover very similar to the Curiosity rover that's currently on Mars, almost a build-to-print version of the same rover, but with a different science payload. So currently Curiosity has a focus on acquiring samples to analyse on board the rover itself. So it actually crushes rocks and analyses them for organic materials and minerals and so forth on the surface of Mars. The difference in 2020 is we're actually going to be acquiring samples. We're going to be doing science on Mars with contact instruments on the end of the arm, putting up to rocks. They do that on Curiosity as well. We'll also be acquiring samples to put in a sample cache, so a little container that will sit on the surface of Mars with some carefully selected samples that we choose during the mission, and leave them there for a future mission to pick up and bring back to Earth to be examined in labs on Earth. So that will be the first time that's ever been done, actually bringing samples back deliberately from Mars to Earth.
Well, we'll no doubt talk a lot more about the specific details, because looking at the students' questions that we've got today, there are some very interesting questions related directly to exactly what that mission will be looking for. But first of all...
Well, first of all, we thought we'd start off with a bit of a game. We have a bit of a game for you. It's called Person, Place, or Thing. So just to have a bit of fun, so we're going to show the students a photo. And now students, you guys will need to turn your microphones on, so you'll have to unmute your mics. And your role will be to answer Abigail's questions. So Abby will ask you a yes or no question. You just have to scream out yes or scream out no. And basically, Abby, you'll have about 6 questions.
She's a good scientist, so no more than 6.
Yeah, to guess what the students are seeing. So, students, are you seeing a picture right now? Now, don't say what it is. Just say yes or no. Can you see a picture? Okay, so let's test to see if this works. I'm going to ask the first question just to make sure. Can you tell me, students, if this is a place? Okay, all right. Well, there's a hint for you, Abby. So it's a place. Now go ahead. You've got 6 questions to guess.
So, you mean I get to ask the
Yes,
question?
you
That's
do.
right. You get to ask the question. So we already know it's a place.
Okay. Is it a place on planet Earth?
No.
Is it a place?
Yes. Definitely a
Yeah,
yes.
was that a yes or a
That
no?
was a definite
Yes.
yes. Just someone out there said no.
Okay.
All right.
Is it a place in Australia? Is it a famous place?
Is it a famous place?
Is it a famous place? Are we allowed to say pass? What do you think, students? Is
Okay,
it
so it's
look, we have to go
borderline
yes or
yes
no.
or no.
Is it a famous place?
Yeah.
It's definitely. All right, and we've just had Kambala join us as well. Welcome, Kambala. All right, so it's on Earth. All right, it's on Earth. It's in Australia, and it's a famous place. 3 questions left, Abby.
Is it a place?
All right, we're getting out of hand now, a bit noisy. All right, students, everybody.
Place I think.
We just had a very large school join us. That's all it was.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to be very quiet so we can hear Abby's question, okay? Because she's got 2 questions left.
Is it a place that I would have been to? How many questions have I got left?
I think this is... two. Okay, 2.
2 left. All right. You're getting close. You can feel it.
Yeah.
Is it a place in a city?
Yes. It's a city. All right, here we go.
Last question.
And it's only yes/no questions, right?
That's correct.
Oh, unless you know the answer.
Yeah, you can, if you think you know, you can say.
So you said yes, it is in a city.
Yes.
Yes, it is a city.
It is a city. Okay. Okay.
It's got a lot to do with your life.
Is it the biggest city in Australia?
But so that's all your questions. So it's not the biggest, but you do have a chance for a guess. So it has something to do with
Melbourne?
very close.
All right, let's reveal
Let's reveal
to
everybody.
Abby.
Students, what place is it?
Brisbane. That's right.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
So
feel homesick.
Yes. All right, students, I'll just get you to mute your mics, please. All right, muting your mics. All right, so welcome back. Okay, so well done there, students. We've got our minds active, and we're focused on Brisbane at the moment. That's where Abigail grew up.
Is that correct, Abby?
That's where I grew up, yeah. Melbourne was where I was booked by, yeah.
Okay,
all right,
that's why
all right.
Melbourne.
Fair enough, fair enough. You would have got it on the next one. All right, 7 questions would have been pretty good, given the entire universe as a place.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to actually take that and go straight into one of the questions from the students. So we've got Santiago from St Francis Xavier. You've got a question for Abby. So if you'd like to make sure your mic's on and nice and clear into the mic.
How did you become interested in the field of geology?
Nice question, Santiago. So I would say that I've always loved the outdoors, and I didn't get exposed or get any experience with geology coming through school, so I didn't even know that it existed as a field of science. So, the normal science subjects you do at school are physics, chemistry, and biology, for example, and you don't get into, or at least at my school, we didn't get into geology, which was sad. And so it was only when I got into university, and at first I was studying physics, and I took geology or earth science as an elective, and I just thought, this is me. It's an opportunity to be outdoors doing science. Anywhere you go in the world, you can step out, look at rocks, and you can read something about the past using the skills you have as a geologist. Even from an aeroplane window, you can look down and understand what went on in the distant past and the places below you. So that's how I came across it, was as an elective subject at university when I was doing something else.
So it just clicked for you. Just rocks was it, huh?
Rocks was it.
All right. Thank you for that. Sorry.
I was going to say I don't know if any of the schools here that are online today, do they have geology or something like geology in their courses?
Any schools there have geology as an elective, or they all do earth sciences as part of their normal year 7 to year 10. In fact, even a bit in year 5 and 6, there is definitely earth and space science as part of that. But any of the high schools
Very lucky.
Yeah, the high schools. Do you actually have geology at your schools? Any of you? All right. So we suggest changing schools. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if there are any schools in Australia that offer geology. So hang in there until you get to university and then try it out.
Yeah,
That's right, yeah.
We might take a question from Kambala. So Kambala, you can turn your microphone on. And, there they are. And this is a question from Dasha. A question from Dasha, please. Dasha, just Dasha.
Yes. Did being a woman affect your path to the position you hold in the mission and in NASA?
Interesting. Not obviously. Being a woman affects everything in life in some way, shape, or form. But I can't say that it necessarily hindered or helped me. I mean, certainly in Australia, in fact, all the way through it, it's definitely been a male-dominated environment that I've worked in. The geology in particular is mostly an area dominated by men. There aren't so many women doing it, so it makes it interesting. It's not. I'd say definitely since coming to JPL, I've found that the opportunities for women are at least as good for men. There's no problems in terms of the opportunities for women here as a scientist at JPL. So I think gender hasn't really necessarily played a role for me in helping or hindering get where I am.
Which is a really good thing, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, great progress.
Yeah, actually, we've interviewed lots of women. Most of the women from NASA are women. Most of the people we've been interviewing from NASA have been. And lots of the YouTube videos and things it's terrific. Seems like a great place to be.
So you know, we've read in the media a lot about what you're going to be doing in the next mission, in the 2020 Mars mission. Can you tell us about what your role is exactly in that mission in terms of the Pixel instrument?
Okay, so I'm the principal investigator of Pixel. Which means I'm the lead for the development of that instrument and its operation on Mars. My team and I developed the instrument over the last about 5 to 6 years at JPL. It was based on my experience in my PhD studies looking at ancient rocks in Australia, 3.5 billion-year-old rocks from the Pilbara in Western Australia, and trying to work out whether the features in those were actual evidence of life or not. And it's an instrument that looks at the chemistry of rocks, the elemental chemistry of the rocks, and it looks at it in very fine detail. So it analyses individual points that are about 100 microns across, and you can scan the beam across the surface of the sample and build up a very detailed, high-resolution map of the distribution of chemical elements in the sample. And there's a picture of the instrument that. That's the instrument that will go on to the Mars rover. The instrument that I was using in the lab was much different. So that's about 12 centimetres across. The one I was using in the lab was about 80 centimetres across and 80 by 80 by 80 and weighed about 120 kilograms. This weighs about 2 kilograms. And it was filled with litres and litres of liquid nitrogen to cool the detector. This has no coolant, it's just a silicon drift detector. So we're trying to do, this is the amazing thing about sending instruments to Mars, is you take something that in a lab is huge, it uses a lot of power, you're able to go and fix it, day to day if any problems arise. So your reliability is less of an issue. You have normal ambient Earth atmosphere to deal with and temperatures and so forth. Then you take that and you compress it down to something that's a fraction of the size, operated off the power of a couple of light bulbs. You put it through huge temperature swings day by day, put it in a really dusty environment where dust is insidious and invades every part of your instrument, and you throw it at the surface of Mars, put huge G-forces on all the parts, and then you operate it remotely with a very long time delay between sending a command and having it operate it on the surface of Mars and getting the data back. So it's all very remote, and that has to last for the prime mission, which in the case of 2020 and for Curiosity is 1 Mars year or 2 Earth years. So it's an amazing feat of engineering to do the same science on Mars that you do on Earth. Under all those constraints.
Yeah, I can imagine that it takes a lot of very detailed planning and preparation, and just such a big team effort too, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So we have a team of about 10 scientists, including myself, that will operate the instrument on Mars, and the scientists will work together to develop the instrument as well and make sure that it's able to achieve the science we want to do on Mars. But then there's also a large engineering team as well, and we've got some of the world's best engineers here at JPL helping us to build this instrument. And so those people will be working from now until launch, and then the science team kind of takes over, grabs the keys and runs with the instrument and goes and does science on the surface of Mars. So it's a very big team effort, and of course we're working with the rover engineering team as well, who are giving us the transport we need to get to the surface of Mars.
Yeah. Now, I was looking at your Twitter. The Mars Lab follows you on Twitter, and I was reading through some of your tweets, and you're saying that you're looking for at Pixel 2020 logo for basically the Pixel Twitter page. You're looking for a logo, and you want some help, correct?
Yes, so every instrument that goes to Mars has a logo, and we'll emblazon that on shirts or whatever as the time comes, and all of the sort of outreach material that we have associated with the instrument. And we thought the naming of the Curiosity rover was such a huge success when that was put out to the public. So we thought there's a couple of instruments doing the same thing now. Us and Sherlock are also looking for. Sherlock is an instrument on the end of the arm next to us, looking for input from the public. So if any of the students there have ideas about a logo for a Pixel,
they can tweet it to you.
Welcome to. Yes.
Excellent. Well, we're seeing your Twitter page right now. So, students, if you have any ideas for the Pixel Twitter page logo, you can send it to Abigail. And who knows, maybe yours will be the one.
And this is a PIXL, which stands for what, Abby? What does the letters actually stand for?
It stands for Planetary Instrument for X-ray Lithochemistry, which is just means using X-rays to look at the chemistry of rocks.
Sounds like great material for a logo, doesn't it, students?
All right.
Actually, are we going to show? We showed James's one. We actually had here, Abby. We couldn't resist the opportunity when we saw that you were actually putting that invitation out there. One of our Mars Lab team got to work overnight, and he'd like to show you as the first person to offer you one. There we go.
Nice work.
Right.
We told him we should pixelate it, but
yeah.
Actually,
speaking of the images, I noticed that all the imagery that goes with the 2020 mission tends to be a bit sketchy. The images of the rover have that real blueprint kind of look. I think we have a picture like that too, Steve, that you might be able to bring up for us. And there's one there. And I just wondered what's the idea behind that? What's the message that you're trying to send with it sort of being in blueprint form?
Well, I'm not the person who put that image together, but my interpretation of it is that I guess there's two takes on it. One is that they're trying to convey the idea that this is in the planning stages, and another one might be that it's like a blueprint copy of the Curiosity rover. That's probably not what they're intended, but you could read that into it.
All right, so if it was the first one, for instance, about we're still in the design phase, at what point do you and your team and the other instrument teams have to say, all right, this is inked in now, this is exactly as it's going to be, or has that already happened?
Good question. Yeah, I'd be pretty worried if they're still showing sketches like this, like the day before launch.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I read this as being giving the impression, as I said, of it being in the early planning stages. So perhaps when we pass one of the major review gates, I'm getting some nods from the side here. That when we pass one of the major review gates and the mission is sort of confirmed and approved, that it'll get a whole new look and feel.
All right, excellent. Well, Abby, we've got another little challenge for you. Here at the Mars Lab, one of the things that students, just like the young people logged in today, do is they log in over the internet, practice driving our robot rovers across our Mars yard, and then carry out a mission as close as we can get to the real kind of thing going on Mars, as a way of giving them a kind of the same sort of experience, I hope, that you're having, or at least you hope to have, as once the new rover is up on Mars. So we thought what we do is cross to our Mars Lab right now through the eyes of one of our rovers. So there we go. Can everyone see that? Just nod if you can. Yeah,
yes,
okay, great. Yeah.
Excellent.
All right, so that's actually looking through one of our rovers called Continuum, and looking through the pan-tilt camera. Now, I'm just wanting to take you forward, Abby, till maybe 2020, a few days after landing, and you look out through one of the cameras from the 2020 rover, and you see something like this over in the distance. Mm-hmm. And if we gave you the opportunity to move our camera around a bit and maybe zoom in on something, is there something in that area that you might ask us to have a closer look at, and then we'll zoom in on it for you and you can do some astrobiology for us, nice and live.
Oh, I see some rocks in the distance. I think I'd start with having a look at some of those rocks that I can see straight in front of us.
All right,
okay.
So we'll zoom in a bit. We've got someone controlling it for us. It doesn't happen automatically. All right, there's a nice zoom.
Nice.
All right, well,
Nice choice.
well,
So if you
saw one of those, we'd
yeah.
be pretty
Well,
excited.
all right. So
Does
can you-
anyone know what that is?
Students, does anyone know what that might be? Not sure? Any guesses?
What do you see on it that Tristan?
I'm not sure I can hear the
I don't
answer.
know.
I'm not-
There's some definite discussion there
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
So Abby,
What kind
why
of thing?
would you be excited if you found this?
Well, okay, so the large rock that's facing us has some lines in it. You can see very thin lines at the bottom. They're sort of horizontal. And as you gradually move up the rock, you can see that they curve upwards and create a dome-like structure. So that looks very similar to the type of feature we call stromatolites. And if you saw something like that, you'd have to you'd have two hypotheses. One is that it might actually be a structure formed by microbial organisms. So stromatolites can form by microbes interacting with sediment as it's deposited on the sea or lake floor. Or there are non-biological methods or processes by which you can create similar structures. And you'd have to go and start looking at this in more detail with the textures, the three-dimensional shape, look at whether there are some other features similar nearby, and look at the properties of those to test those alternate hypotheses. But I tell you, if you saw something like that on Mars, you'd be pretty excited.
I was going to say, have we found anything like that at all yet? Has there been anything even close?
There was a structure found that geometrically is similar, the upside down. It was a bomb, what's called a bomb sag structure, where a lump of rock had deposited into some soft layered sediment and caused those layers to bend downwards. So it's like take this and turn it upside down. And nobody thought for a minute that was biological. So we've seen shapes that are similar, but nothing that cries out to us that it could be a stromatolite.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Now, Levi at St. Francis Xavier, you have a question for Abby. Come on up.
Do you think the microscopic creatures you may find on Mars could be like the ones you found on Earth?
The microscopic.
Do you think that the microscopic creatures that we might find on Mars would be like the ones you found on Earth?
Okay, that's a really good question. So, first question is whether or not we will find any, whether there is anything there. We don't know if Mars was ever inhabited by life. But what I would say is that if Mars was ever inhabited by life, it's safe to assume that it was probably only inhabited for a very short time, because early in Mars's history it became very unhospitable to life, and therefore life wouldn't have had a chance to evolve very far along the evolutionary pathway. So we're not going to look realistically for dinosaur bones or human bones or that kind of thing. We're going to look, we think we'd have a better chance of finding something that looks like very early life on Earth, which is what I spent my graduate studies doing, studying the earliest life forms on Earth, or their fossilised remains in the rock record. And so yes, if what we're looking for on Mars is features like those structures and chemical signatures similar to those that were left by the very earliest life forms on Earth, because that is the most promising sort of pathway to pursue.
Right. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Well, he's leaving, so maybe it did.
Okay.
All right. So we so there's another question actually I'd like to get from Aria Park, which is nicely related to that. Harry, have you got a question there?
Okay. How did you know you wanted to do this job?
Well, okay. So from when I was very young, I knew I wanted to explore planets. I was totally mesmerised by the concept of there being planets there, space in general, but particularly the planets because they seemed a little bit more accessible. And I remember watching some of the science shows about the Voyager mission, and I watched one program about a woman called Carolyn Porco, and she was sitting there talking about her experience watching Voyager approach Saturn, and she was sitting in the laboratory in the wee hours of the morning. She was the only person there, and she was watching images coming down from Saturn that no one had ever seen before. A part of our solar system that no one had ever laid eyes upon, and that just captured my imagination. The idea of exploring places that no one's ever gone before, and if I lived back in the 18th century, maybe it would have been fun to be some kind of ocean-going explorer, but Earth doesn't have as much of that kind of opportunity anymore, and so space is very enticing from that perspective. And but I didn't have any idea of how I would get into that position, how I would pursue a career like that. I thought that I would have to do physics and study astrophysics or something like that, because I hadn't been exposed to geology, as I said earlier. And so I went to university studying physics and didn't like it because I don't like math. And nobody runs, as I subsequently learned from my geology professors, nobody runs faster from maths than a geologist, so I thought geologist is the field for me. And then, so I completed that degree, and then, so from doing that, the natural pathway in Australia was actually to go into like the mining or oil industry. So I graduated and actually initially took a job working for Woodside Petroleum over in Perth, and all my fellow students did similar sorts of things. And it was only at the very end of my degree when Malcolm Walter, who I believe is at the powerhouse today, I met him, and he gave me the opportunity to do a PhD studying earliest evidence of life on Earth as a possible analogue for the search for life on Mars. And I just said, yep, that'll be me. And I left Woodside, started my thesis.
Wow. Well, that sounds fantastic. We couldn't resist. If you mentioned someone there, Professor Malcolm Walter. So Abby, we thought we'd bring him in with us. So welcome.
Yay. Hi, Malcolm.
Hello, Abby. Lovely to see you.
You too.
Yeah, so Malcolm, you and Abby kind of go way back, don't you, academically?
Way back, yeah, 15 years or more. That's quite a long time.
All right. So what was your...
It's been that long, wow.
So can you tell us a bit about how you met or how you'd come to know Abby?
Well, I've been working in the Pilbara area of Western Australia on evidence of early life, and Abby came along and was interested in what I was doing. I was delighted that she was, and she started a PhD with me.
All right, so you're in the your area of study. Well, so that was.
I'm paleontologist and a geologist.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
All right, so.
And how was Abby as a student?
Oh, I'm not sure what I'm going to say.
I'm listening.
Yes, I'm sure you are. Abby was a wonderful student. She was very clever. And of course, that's why she's ended up at JPL, and that demonstrates just how clever she is.
Yeah. So what?
Thanks, Malcolm.
Perhaps both Abby and Malcolm, you could both answer this. What are the opportunities for young? I love the idea that you don't have to know maths. So that means, because that's often one of the things that maybe scares young people off some of the sciences. So there are clearly great science careers that you can have that don't need maths. You just got to be able to count the samples, I imagine. But after that, but talk a little about the opportunities for science in Australia, and maybe ultimately across to NASA.
Yeah, well, I think Abby was exaggerating a little. I'm sure she's quite good at maths, really. And so was I when I was a student, even though I've forgotten a lot of it now. But there are wonderful opportunities in Australia, in all, not just in geology, but in all aspects of science. It's a very technological world that we live in these days, and we need to be technologically savvy. And so scientists and engineers and mathematicians are in great demand at the moment. So there are lots of jobs.
So, and what do you think it means for an Australian, not just an Australian woman, but for an Australian to take a position like this?
Oh, I
with an
think
organisation like
it's
NASA?
absolutely wonderful to have a role model like Abby, and so that young people can see just what is possible. And she's very important in that regard.
So you'll be watching closely when 2020 lands.
I certainly will be, yes. And Abby probably won't be getting much sleep for quite some time.
That's already the case.
Yeah, you're not on Mars time yet, though, are you?
No.
That will happen,
No.
though. That does happen, though, doesn't it, when you get closer to the mission?
It does. It's interesting because I think Mars time was, for 90 days when the Mars exploration rovers were there. The whole duration of the mission was 90 days, and beyond that, everything was gravy. So they went on to normal time. And then for MSL, they did Mars time, but there was starting to be a question about, well, do we really need to do that? And it ended up that, now we're wondering whether for Mars 2020, is it better to have a period of time where we're not doing Mars time at first? You test out the rover, you do all your engineering tests, send the scientists home to sort of get some sleep. And once the rover's all ready to go and start doing some serious science, then get on to the Mars time. I think Mars time is definitely something you need to do to get maximum efficiency of operations, but whether you do it straight off at the start of the mission or you wait, that's to be determined.
So Abby, how do you deal with the time delays for the signals to and from Mars?
Well, you wait. you
How long?
Patiently.
Everything has to be done in a series of, the length of time depends on the distance between Earth and Mars at that time. But the strategy is to plan in cycles, upload the commands during at a set time of day, or the planned time of day, let the rover carry out its operations until the next uplink, downlink cycle. And so everything has to be sort of planned out in packets. Actually, one of the things that we're very keen to push on in 2020 is to decrease the amount of what we call ground in a loop. So having ground control involved in the decision command cycle in that loop, because rather than every time you want to do something, you have to have ground in the loop to make a decision about it, and then the rover goes and does it. There's got to be more of what the rover can do, more stuff that the rover can do itself, sort of onboard autonomy, clever analysis of images or of data that's coming in to allow us to place the arm or direct an experiment a certain way without having to wait for that command cycle to come around.
Yeah, so you're not actually driving the rover in real time. So just tell us how long the signals take on average to go backwards and forwards.
On average,
About 20 minutes, is it? Something like that?
5 to 20 in each direction.
5 to 20, 5 to 20 minutes in each direction.
Yeah.
Got brought off the side here.
So it's a bit different from driving rovers in our Mars lab here in the Powerhouse Museum. That's just what I was trying to get at.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, ours is in pretty much real time. There's a second or two delay, which students usually find quite tricky, and they're saying, "Oh, we thought it was stopped and it hasn't stopped," or we thought we were closer than we were. But 20 to 24 minutes, that's quite a delay, isn't it?
Yep, so you've got to be patient, and you can't expect things to happen as soon as you want them to. So everything's very carefully planned, and you sit and wait for the results of what you planned to come back.
Mm.
Look, Abby, I was wondering, so we're coming to the end of our session here, but when's you must be so busy. When do you plan to come home to Australia next? And when you do come home, what's your favorite thing to do or to eat or?
It's okay. So I'm planning to come back. I usually come back once or twice a year. Hopefully, I usually come around the US Thanksgiving time, which is November, because everything gets quiet here, but still all. I don't have to use a lot of vacation to go over to Australia. I usually go to Sydney and I grab myself a meat pie with tomato sauce, because they don't have them here.
No.
And what do you do? What do you do when you're not picking up rocks and looking at them? What do you do over there in California for your recreation?
For fun.
Yeah, for away from NASA.
For recreation. I'm trying to remember what recreation is at this point. Getting enough of it. My husband and my 2-year-old daughter and I, we like to go hiking and do a bit of we used to do a bit of cross-country skiing, but she's only 2, so she's not quite up to the cross-country skis yet. I love going back to Australia. We go back to a farm up in far north Queensland, which is a rainforest and lots of trees and that kind of thing. And that's the one holiday I get per year is that's what we do. Is we go back there and just chill out on the tropical rainforest tablelands of far north Queensland.
They call those solar days, don't they? At JPL, it's a solar day. We heard.
Yeah. So a sol is instead of a day on Mars, it's a sol.
That's right. Yep. So they call. Now I've got a question for you. I was just sometimes we hear, and I don't like hearing it, but sometimes we hear from young people, I don't like to do science. Science is boring, or science doesn't seem relevant. What message do you have for young people out there who say those kinds of things, or at least think those kinds of things?
I think you don't know. You mustn't have experienced science enough. I think science is fabulous. It's liberating that you can understand the world around you, the way it works, and anything you don't understand, you can use the scientific approach to figure it out yourself. So rather than having to sit there and accept what somebody tells you about the world, how it works, why something is the way it is, as a scientist, you can decide for yourself. You can pretty much tackle any problem you want. Given time, you can figure it out. So that's a really just a liberating, wonderful way to live through life, unconstrained by other people's views of the world.
And if a young person hearing you and your rocks is it, rocks was just it for you, what advice would you give someone who was interested in maybe following a career in geology that might ultimately lead to space, but what sorts of things should they start doing?
Well, you should go to university and do a geology degree. In order to do that, you just need your basic high school certificate and if you haven't done maths and sciences, then you might need to do some bridging courses, but you'll need those to get into like a Bachelor of Applied Science or something similar.
And what about they should start picking up rocks as well?
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love rocks? Who doesn't love going to the beach and picking up pebbles and seeing what the different features in the rocks are? So everywhere you go, you should pick up or look at the rocks around you and start to notice the differences between them, and you'll see that there is a lot of variety, and all of that variety means something. So it's telling you something about the past history of the Earth. Layers of sediment laid down in the bottom of a lake, seashells that were washed up on an ancient seashore. You can look for all those things that are preserved in the rock record. So everywhere you go, you can look for little features and wonder about what they might mean.
Wow. Well, Abby, thank you so much for joining us today. Look, we look forward to following your progress, and we really look forward to the 2020 Mars mission. But I know there's lots of work ahead. But we'll follow your progress, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Will everyone join me? Turn your microphones high up and say thank you, big Australian thank you to Abby today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Abby.
That's fantastic.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you again, Abby. And we will see you very soon. And we have a tradition here at the Mars Lab. We always end with Mars Lab out. So
Mars Lab
1,
out,
2,
yep.
3. Mars Lab out.